Hi, I'm Stephen Horne, herbalist, and with me is Dr. Kimberly Balas, naturopath, and we're going to talk a little bit about the coronavirus. So, first of all, in the past, I've seen all these things, being SARS and H1N1 and swine flu and avian flu, and usually I just kind of don't pay much attention to it because a lot of it's fear mongering. But this seems to be a little bit more serious threat. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know about the threat with the contagion factor being a 2. I know that there have been more mechanisms for containment on this. I think mostly not to overwhelm our healthcare system. I think sanitary habits of people not washing their hands are being a bit exposed in this spread of this and how it affects the epithelial membrane. So I think just the density in the area of society, the humidity factor with intake, the heat factor, things like that. There are a lot of factors we could talk about of why certain areas are spreading more other than, the variable of the travel. But, we can look at some of those and find out how to protect yourself.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about protecting ourselves from this virus. Obviously, sanitation is the number one thing to prevent contagion. But you can also do some things like, for example, diffuse some essential oils in your home, which reduces the spread of things. Be careful, not getting into large groups of people, to avoid that. And I know one of the things that you mentioned is you could use something as a nasal spray, like.
I have like myself, our whole office, our family on a silver nose spray, just because of the protectant, the barrier at that epithelial membrane here with those nerve endings coming in of how that coronavirus attaches. So it does enter the body primarily through the nose. It can go in through the eyes and the mouth, thus the importance of washing your hands. But there's still a lot to learn of how it enters into the lungs with the respiratory virus in the respiratory tract. But that's primarily through the nose.
Right. And so, again, something to wash out your nose like silver or whatever to kind of flush out the virus is part of the way. Now, most people are not going to have a serious problem with this. Almost all of the people who've died are older people, especially in Italy. But let's say there's someone like me, have a history of respiratory problems, and I'm over 60, so I'm in the prime category. What would a person like me do to help prevent themselves from getting sick?
But it's kind of not a fair question, Stephen, because I know your diet and I know the attention you pay. So you're not a typical over 60 candidate, okay? We might have to remove that variable.
I know I'm not, which is why I don't worry. I pay, people get afraid of the microbe, and I always am concerned about the terrain. How healthy am I?
Exactly. And that's what we're educating people on is the terrain. So you may have a virus. You might even be a carrier of this viral, but if you're not exhibiting symptoms, then a lot of people, there's not a smoke alarm going off here. So we're looking at people that change the biological terrain in a negative manner via diet, obviously, being exposure, sanitation.
How much soda pop and stuff was missing from the grocery store shelves.
Holy moly. I went to the grocery store, and let me just tell you, for me, I was ecstatic because it was my normal shopping day. I got there, all of the white bread is gone, but hey, all the organic was left. All the organic soups were left. All the organic produce was still there. I was like, well, this really didn't impact me that much at all because this is all I buy anyway. But then you have someone in front of you, with 6 cases of soda, a dozen boxes of mac and cheese, white bread, buying hot dog buns because there was no white bread left, white pasta spaghetti sauce. It's like, yeah, that's going to impact people with those lack of attentive details to their diet.
Right. And that's really the reason why we're so at risk for something that coronavirus is in the family of viruses that cause colds. So normally they're not anything serious.
Yeah.
But this, of course, is a little more serious than other ones. But still, the reason why we're so susceptible to this stuff is because we're just generally not healthy.
It's a viral pneumonia. And, just any basic viral stuff to get into a little bit of the science of it is like how it attaches, like through these little proteins, these or via glycoproteins. They're like in this little viral envelope. So you can imagine, think we got to go back. I might be dating myself if I talk about snail mail of somebody showing up with an envelope at your door, but so something from Amazon comes in an envelope and you decide to open it. Well, all of a sudden something comes out of it and breaks into little pieces, whether it's like dust or something fragile got broken. That's kind of how a virus is. And then it's around our cell. Well, then those little pieces go into the cell. And like that little envelope opened, it went into the cell. Well, now all those little pieces in the cell are grabbing these proteins in the cell of our healthy RNA to put themselves back together again. So then it'll put itself back together again. And then it'll break the cell down and then the cell releases it. And you get this duplicable process going on that you're getting a viral reaction.
Right. Cells viruses aren't actually living things because they don't eat, they don't produce waste, they don't reproduce, but they have affinity for certain cells because of their little membrane. And when they get to a real cell and get inside, then they hijack the mechanisms for duplicating RNA and DNA,
right,
which creates foreign proteins inside the cell that makes the cell dysfunctional, right?
Right. And then that cell has to break down, and then those little viral parts that put themselves all back together again, like a little robot now, have also built part of this little protective coating around themselves. So it's a little bit harder for the body to do something with them because, we're back to simplistic. What is our biological terrain in our immune system is identify self or not self and flush the irritant. Well,
infections is the immune system itself. Because modern medicine has a few medicines that kind of help the body a little bit with flushing the viruses, but primarily the only thing they have is vaccines, and all the vaccine is doing is giving you a weakened case of the disease so your immune system will build up resistance to it. So really it's the immune system that fights viruses, and so the whole thing we should be concerned about, how do we combat this, is how do we build up the immune system to resist it in the first place and then fight it in the second place.
Right. And then another thing, viruses are specific to their host. Like, for example, the chickenpox virus infects humans, but it doesn't really affect dogs. So in this particular case with corona, what they're talking about is how it jumped species, like what the swine stem do its job. Because if we're just chasing each little particle of the virus, we're going to lose that war. We have to give the body what it needs to go to the war.
Well, one of the things that I learned years ago, and I think it was the most important thing I ever learned, was the fever and these other symptoms are actually part of the immune response. So to me, saying, oh, well, you've got a fever, take down the fever with some aspirin or Tylenol or whatever is the wrong advice, because the fever is inhibiting the viral replication. It's part of what the immune system is doing to fight the disease. Same thing with cough. If your body's trying to get stuff out of your lungs, then why are you taking a cough suppressant to keep it in there? That's one of the mistakes people make that actually makes things worse. Whereas I started using remedies that actually help the body flush out what's irritating it. Right?
Exactly. So, and another thing we can do is, the body, we contain antibodies that are like our IgG, our IgM, our IgA, IgE. They're different antibodies called immunoglobulins. And those can help how the immune system's working and how it's actually releasing certain things and how it deals with things like that. So, it's like different viruses by attaching to that DNA can trigger different responses. So when we look at, let's say an interleukin-2 or an interferon, those are certain things that boost, how the immune response it alerts the immune system so it can go after the actual virus and recognize it. So it kind of sends a little email out and it tells the immune system to attack. So stop the virus from growing, stop it from dividing. More importantly, it creates a healthy cell so that it can start on this attack or this defense.
Right. It develops something to tag the cells that are infected and also to tag the viral material itself, so that the different immune cells can deal with those dysfunctional things and clean them out of the body.
Yeah, it just builds that up, the body's immune system to respond to these foreign substances. So we don't have to identify each and every foreign substance of whether it's bacterial or fungal or viral. We just need to build up how these IgG and IgM, these little immunoglobulins, are going after whatever's there.
Well, besides eating a healthier diet and taking care of basic sanitation, what are some supplements that you think are good for boosting your immune system, especially for something potentially like the coronavirus?
Well, a lot of stuff that I have looked at, we're looking at some viral protocols that we use normally anyway, like the olive leaf and our typical vitamin C. I know here the vitamin C has been wiped off the shelf, but the vitamin C, like doing as a fat soluble with vitamin C, you also have to have good fats coming in with the diet to make that a more effective strategy for altering the biological terrain. I love ashwagandha. It is an immunoadaptogen. It actually helps build how the body produces this interleukin-2. Okay, so that makes it makes more, like, let's say you're trying to put an alphabet together out of your alphabet soup. So you're pulling these letters out, lining them up. So what the interleukin-2 does is it makes more copies of the letters that still exist. So you can spell more words out, and it fills in the gaps of certain defenses. So it increases how your body is going to respond to anything that's coming in as a foreign invader. So the interleukin-2 and then the gamma interferon that helps produce with the antibodies too. So that helps with a lot of chronic viral stuff that's going on with interferon. They've typically used it in hepatitis C, but ashwagandha helps the body release these with this, how the white blood cell count and the lymphocytes are working to attack things that don't belong in the body.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the other ones I think it's a good one is astragalus. And
yes.
I like that because I saw some notes from a lecture from a doctor actually in China and some of the things that they're doing. And I noticed that some of the formulas they're using for this, the number one ingredient is astragalus, which has been historically used to ward off viruses during the wintertime, cold and flu season.
Right.
And
which
again, kind of nourishing adaptogen. Now, the one that you mentioned to me, and I thought, why didn't I think of this, is cordyceps? Because, when I have a little bit of problem with my lungs and I take cordyceps, it really helps fortify my lungs for me to, fight something off, but also just for my lungs to be less reactive to things.
And stamina and oxygen uptake with the stamina. Yeah. So, in combining the ashwagandha and the cordyceps, or combining the cordyceps even in like a mushroom blend of like the chaga and other mushrooms too, you are actually helping the body with those IgG and IgM antibodies build up a defense, and not only build up a defense for a current structure going on or a current irritant that's coming into the terrain, it's also building it up for future immunity to memorize that. So it's taking the cell structure and like increasing its library of what it should recognize.
So for boosting our immune system, we've got the vitamin A, vitamin D3, vitamin C. Right. We've got astragalus, cordyceps, and other medicinal mushrooms. You've got the ashwagandha. So there's a lot of things we could take besides making sure we're eating healthy, making sure we're paying attention to basic sanitation, that we can boost our immune system so that when we are exposed to it, our body is able to defend ourselves rather quickly. But now, anything we do for like protocols for a specific virus that we've never worked with before is just basically speculation. But we do know that it's a respiratory virus that causes a viral pneumonia. So we know a lot of things that we can do to help the body with that kind of things. What are some of the things that you would consider if someone does come down with this viral thing and start to feel some coughing and other symptoms?
Well, going back to our first line of immune defense with the mucosal membrane lining and that epithelial membrane lining of how it has entered, our number one step is strengthen that, because the body's doing exactly what it was supposed to do. It's creating the fever, it's creating more mucus, it's creating exit plans for this. To be successful in the body carrying out that exit plan is where we support it with nutrition, sleep, no sugar in the diet, things that are not going to take that down further. Because why does the body have to fight 2 or 3 battles? One being lack of rest, or another battle being I've got all the sugar coming in that's reducing my immune response. Hydration is going to be really important. How we increase oxygen flow to the lungs. So cleaning the blood up, there are things like there are specific elements like nitric oxide that can clean the blood up and help transport things better. So not only transporting nutrients to the cell and oxygen through the bloodstream, it's very vital for transporting toxins out. So, keeping hydration up so that you can make sure that you're activating that phase 2 detox with the colon and kidney to get it out of the body. And then,
because the body's going to use fluid, water, to make mucus and whatever, to cough up, drain out. And by making sure that stays well hydrated so that it keeps moving is part of the way we enhance what the body does. And that's one of the oldest remedies around. Rest in bed, drink plenty of fluids, right?
The cheapest, easiest way to do it. And, but then get the roadblocks out of the way. Don't make your immune system have to drive through a construction zone with potholes and go around everything, with acid forming foods that are coming in, and, with, like we mentioned, the sugar taking the immune system down. With stress, don't make it fight harder than it already is trying to work on a viral compound that it's having.
That's another thing. Learn. If we get all scared and panicky and whatever, and run to the grocery store and buy all the toilet paper, and okay, we know that.
Oh, sorry, that one makes me laugh.
We know that stress takes down your immune system. So getting all stressed out about everything is not a good. So you're quarantined. Play a game, enjoy a little fun time, relax. Right? Don't.
It is. Go back and do some things that bring you joy, because the more that you release the stress of what's going on in a panic, fear-driven society, the more I think that's where the self-isolation is way more important than from the viral compound.
Right. It's like the hysteria is contagious, right?
It is. People, one of my patients came in and said, hey, I ran into this lady buying all the toilet paper. And she goes, the funny part was I asked her why, and she didn't know. She just said, oh, because everybody else is. It's like, okay, this is not an intestinal viral thing. It just, one thing catches hold and it sweeps the nation because of that fear, panic mode. So I would say, in addition to that, having a nice, good B complex on hand for anything like even pantothenic acid that can help with this anxiety and fear-driven stuff. More importantly, just turn your TV off. That's probably going to help the stress the most.
There's a flower essence called red clover. It's very specific for not buying into the mob mentality, for helping you to keep your head level and not just get caught up in the wave of hysteria of the group. And I think
now we know the next.
I honestly wish we could put that flower essence in the water supply at times like this and just get.
Well, I was going to say, now we're going to know the next flower essence that will not be available on the shelf.
Right. And obviously you can take some of the same things you would use to prevent it, whatever, but just think about if something's in your lungs, you use expectorants and decongestants to kick it out. The traditional thing is, things like horseradish and wild cherry bark and white pine bark, and I don't know. There's a whole bunch of
Well, and
different herbs.
even going back to a lot of your sulfuric stuff like garlic, and
Garlic.
the onion poultices on the chest, those are an age-old remedy. The mustard packs on the chest, garlic on the feet. There's a lot of sulfuric compounds that we have in our pantry that you could use, that have that sulfuric action. So
garlic is particularly helpful because it has an affinity for the lungs, and I've used it for pneumonia before.
Right. And then pleurisy root, that one's not as easy to get a hold of, but it's another good herb that's specifically for lung conditions.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's a good thing. I mean, the main thing here is don't panic. Most people are just going to get through this fine, and people who are susceptible, if they take things to build their immune system and eat healthier, they're less likely to have complications. And if they do have complications, then hopefully by the quarantine, the medical system isn't overrun, and the people who do need medical assistance can get it. But all the rest of us shouldn't panic and worry about all of it.
Right. And it is self-facilitation, take care of yourself and your family, which is a bonus to some of the, social disassociation here, social distancing. I have to share that being in Wyoming, I saw a really cute sign that someone had put up, and it said, Wyoming, social distancing since 1892. So among our little antelope herds here, we are taking this serious, and we are continuing to see people in our office and on an as needed basis. And we're also telling everyone how to change their biological terrain.
All right. Kim, let's talk about the coronavirus from the standpoint of who is the most susceptible that should take the greatest precautions and be the most concerned, because young children are not, by and large, getting it or being harmed by it. Almost all of the people who are dying from it are over 60. The average age of people dying from it in Italy is 81. It seemed to have hit a younger population in China. But what is making certain populations more susceptible than others? So let's talk about that for a moment, and you have some ideas.
Ideas, opinions, just looking at general populations as a whole and not specifically, calling anyone out on it, but they do have a lot of male smokers in China. It's very dominant of the tobacco use in China. So a lot of men smoke there. So you've already have a susceptibility set up with the lungs if you are a smoker. COPD patients, of course, more of a susceptibility. Italy,
maybe?
Yeah. And environmental chemicals. So I would look at people that maybe they're painters or, dealing with environmental toxins coming in through the lung.
So in other words, if people already have things that have weakened their lungs, that is one of the things that makes you more susceptible to a virus that affects your lungs, right?
And would make you susceptible to viral, bacterial, anything that affects the lungs,
Right.
I would think because of the predisposition. Some people will have genetic predisposition to things. If you have a history of pneumonia or a history of bronchitis, that might, be a weak link in your biological terrain, your body system that may set you up just to pay more attention. Not saying that it's inevitable, but just to pay more attention to it. With Italy having a large outbreak, they also have the largest elderly population in Europe. So that's probably why the average age 81, and the Europeans do tend to smoke more as well. So, and it's not singling out them, but out smokers, we just have to look at where are the weak links in this variable that we could help. If you don't have a history of lung, rate yourself of your past, whether you've got a cold or flu or whatever you've experienced. Were your lungs hit first or last, or were they affected at all? So on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate your typical lung health? And that's going to give you an idea of, how to boost up your immune system more.
Right. Very good. So if a person does have a tendency to weakness in the lung, there are some things that can strengthen the lungs. Astragalus, mullein is very good for just basically hydrating the lungs when you dried them out from smoking and so forth. Cordyceps, fabulous lung tonic. So there are things that you could take to, strengthen and fortify your lungs. The Chinese metal increasing formula that contains astragalus is a really good one.
Herbs for increasing metal on the energetic chart would, definitely work there. Vitamin C, again, that's going to help with a lung strengthening. People see it like as an antiviral immune boosting, but it does strengthen lungs. Things that are going to get an oxygen supply to the lungs.
Because that's where the people have the problems, is because they get the problems with their lungs with the virus, and then they are not getting good oxygen uptake, and so they have to get on a respirator. So
So even and again, hydration, because getting the hydration to the cell, you're going to be able to release toxins, take in nutrients, and you get more oxygen supply if the blood's clean.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your ideas there, and hope I'm sure people will benefit from this. And for the people who have healthy lungs or younger and whatever, just pay attention to good sanitation and eat healthy and don't worry so much, right?
Exactly. So, all right, great.
All right, good. Well, Kim, thanks for joining me and talking about this, because I think this is very timely information for everybody. Okay.
It was fun. And just know that, with all of our humor infused in this, just know that we are serious about helping everyone with this as well.